jazz music thing. There was some of us coming from a more sort of irreverent side of things in a way, you know. And then there's Phil Faxman, who you'll hear after this, who came from a classical background, wonderful musician, you know. So I suppose it was the Little Theatre Club. I then started coming into London for the guitar lessons and playing there. I slept on people's floors. I didn't know anything about signing on, so I got a paper round. I was living off a paper round. If it wasn't for the free improvising world, if you like, then I'd been homeless on the streets, basically, you know. So these people are my family, you know, and I'm so pleased to have been part of it and still part of it.
Do you feel music's in its life, in its 5 years of its existence, 4 or 5 years, was it a galvanizing force having this magazine, where it became a place where people could actually meet within the context of the magazine? Do you think it encouraged others to come and investigate this so-called difficult music?
I think it must have done, actually. I mean, one person I met in about 74, I think, or maybe 73, was Luke Outcamp, who's a composer and improviser who lives in The Hague, saxophone player. And he was a subscriber, and it had an influence. It went to the Dutch scene, I know, and Dutch musicians would come here, and we kind of talk about things in the magazine, and then they talk about stuff. So you kind of, not necessarily the things in the magazine might act as a kind of trigger for conversations you're having outside about stuff. So you start on, did you see that? Oh, it's not really my cup of tea. I think this, you know, etc. You know, so I mean, it's not. What I'm trying to say is, it's not a manifesto.
Right.
You know?
It's a little hairier than that.
Yes.
Oh, and of course there was
actually, that's an interesting name, the Hairy Manifesto.
Hairy Manifesto. That was your punk name back then. And of course there was a Dutch issue of the magazine that sort of Han Bennick pretty much kind of edited, I believe.
That's right.
Yeah. And so the magazine did sort of go through these places where they would allow something like that. And then I think there was definitely sort of a realization that it was a very sort of male-centric scene in a way, and the magazine took it upon itself to encourage some dialogue about a lot of gender balance that should go on or could go on in this music, and there was an issue that was devoted a lot to the Feminist improvising group. I'd like to know more about the Feminist improvising group, because they're very interesting to me. They only had one cassette that was published. It was Maggie Nichols, and do you have much recall of this group? Because I'm always thinking, like, that's a group that should reform and come here and play. I think that would, and the only information I really have read about them so much is in the pages of Music's magazine, with the amazing photos that Val Wilmer took, etc.
I feel a bit uncomfortable talking about women in improvised music. I think women should talk about women in improvised music. But I saw the group play at a festival at the Cockpit, and they did it was kind of a very performance-based thing with, I think, Sally Potter, Maggie, Lindsay Cooper, Corinne Linsall maybe, and also involved ironing boards and vacuum cleaners. So they were taking on, you know, the whole kind of thing about women's role in society. They were introducing things in a theatrical way as well as a musical way, and I think that was very nice, you know. I took exception at one point, and this is a guy talking about the thing, where the London Musicians Collective had an evening solely for women. It's all women musicians, I didn't have a problem with that, but only women were allowed to buy tickets to go in, and they had a grant from Camden Council to put on this women-only event, including the audience. But then, actually, I spoke with Maggie, and she explained the the thinking behind this, and it's quite true. I mean, some women don't want to be in the company of men because they're damaged and frightened and need somewhere where they can feel safe. You know.
That's interesting. I mean, I never heard that story before. So in a way, that's really a presage to like the riot girl movement in punk rock in the '90s.
Yes. Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Did you feel when music stops publishing in '79 that it had run its course as far as this exposition of experimental music and free improvised music in journalism? Did you think that possibly it was usurped by the explosion of punk rock and whatever avant-garde tendency that was?
I'm not sure. David and Steve went off to run Collusion Magazine, which was another magazine, so their energies sort of were diverted onto that. I think Martin and Mandy had left, who were the original people who set it up, the Davidsons. And I think, I'm not sure about Max. I must ask Max Boucher, because he was here earlier actually, and felt he couldn't stay, but he had to go somewhere. But I don't know. It could have been that the printing machine had broken down. Actually, to be honest, at that point, because things do have their time. They do kind of run out of steam. But in a way, things like music are a bit like, I remember having a conversation with Derek Bailey around this time actually about the difference between surrealism and Dada. It's 100 years of Dada today. Dada said, it's not dead, it will come back when the circumstances are there for it. Whereas surrealism had a manifesto, you know, which is why I'm saying this isn't a manifesto. I think there's a difference between those kind of things. So whether, I'm not sure if it has had its time, it kind of ran out of steam then, for whatever reason, the printer had broken, or, you know, David and Steve running Collusion and things. But there's no reason why it can't start again, as long as it's not a faded copy. We have not a faded copy, but a much better, slightly bigger now.
It's bigger.
It's bigger as well.
Yeah, no, we enlarged a lot of the pages.
That's
all the
right.
Pages,
So, you know, there's no reason to copy that, but to be inspired by that in that way, in the same way we can be inspired by Dada, I think, in when the circumstances arise, you know. So, I don't really know. I think there's a need for it. I mean, I talk to people on the improvised music scene, you know, because I run this thing, Mopo Moso, we've been doing this for 25 years now, and Unbroken Series. And I talk to other people who started organising gigs here and there and everywhere and stuff, and it's kind of popping up, and I'm saying, what about putting something together again? You know, I mean, apart from musics and the listings of the stuff on that, there was a thing called Improgram, which again was an A4 sheet, which listed all the gigs in London. You know, kind of little simple things like that, and it just requires the chemistry of a group of people coming together and saying, hey, what can we do that can help?
A lot of the energy in the magazine comes out of the letters section, and at some point I think somebody sort of came up with a term for the magazine. They called it a squabble zine. And but you know, the so-called squabbling that goes on in the letter section is fascinating, because it's a lot of people responding to articles that were written and stating their case, either pro or con to it, and then it would continue in subsequent issues, where it was just this bit of a firefight sometimes about certain issues that concern themselves with the application of the musician towards free improvised music, etc. And what I think that was where a lot of people now who are involved with the magazine were just like, I really don't want that out there again, you know. But but it was so long ago. I mean, I find that to be, in a way, some of the most informational, for me, interest in the magazine is hearing these really personal voices, be it Evan or Derek or yourself, or Maggie, and writing in response to things that were published, and so I don't know why I brought that up. I just think that's just like, it's such a big. People do bring that up when I talk about this. Like, oh, there was a squabble zine, and there was like everybody was just like, at odds with each other. But it's kind of it's a really great dynamic, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember specifically, because I know I said I'd give it a look all the way through this week, but my office chair broke and I've spent ages trying to get the right height for the computer. It really is a difficult job. The slight, a little bit makes a difference. So I can't actually remember the specific, squabbles, basically. But it was a time when sometimes, you felt the knife was coming in your back that week, And I can remember, for instance, being in a pub off Lavender Hill with David Toop and Paul Burwell, being quite drunk and having an argument with David Toop, and we were almost going to go outside and fight. And I forget what it was about. It was some obscure sort of esoteric point and stuff. But somebody we were talking about earlier outside, the poet Libby Houston, told me that in Edinburgh, at a similar sort of time, you get these very academic poets in the pub taking their glasses off and going outside to sort of have a fight based on a rhyming couplet, So, so it was, it wasn't necessarily a nasty thing in a way. It was just we were all fired up about what we believed in and was doing, And at the end of the day, we still like each other. And as I said, it was that sort of family thing, for me personally. So any family you get squabbles, actually.
Is there anybody who would like to ask a question of John in regards to either music's or the gentleman's own sort of thoughts?
Sorry.
Are there? I can't really see very well because the lights are shining in our eyes here. But if anybody has a question, I see a finger in the air. And
is that mine? Yeah.
Yeah, just speak loudly and we'll hear.
Resident smack. There's quite an active jazz improv and improvised music scene alive in London at the moment. Do you feel that there's continuity, that that there's a continuous thread going through from musics into what's happening today? People like Dave Tucker and the Improvisers Orchestra of London and stuff.
Very much so, actually. I mean, I think that all the seeds, at Ronnie Scott's funeral, I met Bryon Case, who I hadn't seen for a long time. He was a journalist, and at one time he did a review of an improvised music gig in, I think, NME, maybe, something like that. And he described the audience as being two men scowling under their tea cosies. And it was quite true at that time. He played an audience of two people in a room over a pub, And I said to Bryon, that was the most accurate review I can remember in a mainstream music magazine at the time. It was great, and from that, it's kind of grown so much, I think, and that's wonderful. I think what happens is that there are kind of problems with the threads and skeins of all of this. Some people think that playing free improvised music is about making the right sort of noises. It's not just about the sensation. It's about being engaged, as Robert Fripp would say, the head, the heart, and the hips. intellectually, emotionally, and physically. In the here and now. It's a really, it's a live phenomenon.
In a sense, it's not tied to a specific genre. It's about the freedom, and that freedom is what ties it all together.
I think that's pretty damn spot on, actually. Yeah, I really do. I think for me, when I put my own groups together, the larger groups, Quaqua events and things, I think about the orchestration, but I also think about the orchestration in terms of the musicality of the people, and that's spread right across the board, from people working in noise music, from a punk background, from a classical background, from a jazz background, from so many different backgrounds, and they all bring their own musicality to bear. Every individual in this room, I believe, carries their own sorry, this is sounding like an evangelist meeting. You've all carrying your own musicality within you, you know. And, but that's true, you know. We each have our unique experience of music which we've heard in the womb throughout our lives, growing up, you know, and our ears. Chris McGregor, the South African piano player, once was asked what his favourite instrument was, and he said the drum, the ear drum, you know, and that is so cool, because it's about listening, and it's about our musicality, and it's about that freedom, you know. And when you're in a group, I mean, this is a stereotype. I was talking to a Japanese person and said, well, I'm trying to explain what you do. Well, it's free. I could do anything I like. And I said, yes. And he immediately went, and I just thought, sorry, that was such a stupid Japanese stereotype. But I knew what he meant. But the point is, if everybody went around going, all the time, then you're not kind of working together, you know. So what you do is, within improvisation, you learn to work together from all those aspects. And I think that that's what we've they're the kind of, if you like, the political seeds of what we were saying, that it, you know, we can work together, you know. And it saddens me when I see that they have a ceasefire in Aleppo that lasts for 6 days, and the great brains in society can't even get a ceasefire going for 6 days, and there's kids being bombed, you know. At least we can play some music together and listen, you know.
Yeah, I think it's definitely as far as continuity goes. I think it's endless, you know, because I think it's a true balance between the personal and the collective, especially in the responsibility towards playing for improvised music. I mean, you talk about I mean, it's like that's what's, you know, you see that in the political arena right now. It's just like everybody's just going, you know, especially in America.
Yeah.
It's heinous.
Yeah, you must be feeling a bit.
You know,
fed
but
up with that.
I find, especially in the music that's sort of talked about and discussed in passion in Music's magazine, it's all about this idea of finding a real true balance in collective work as well as the personal. So everybody who is involved with it, either as an activist playing the music or an activist, you know, listening to the music, it's really non-hierarchical in that sense, where everybody's involved and in playing and listening, and that experience is really it's really incredible, because it defies politics. And so you know, when you talk about something like, you know, a ceasefire that just sort of is a failure, in a way, I think the model of this kind of community is really important to share on that level of you know, even though it's an abstraction.
Yes.
So in that sense, that's a really interesting thing that you said.
I think the sharing is important, and I feel that it's not just amongst the musicians; it's between the musicians and the audience, as you say, because when we're playing the music and the audience is listening to the music, we're all discovering the music at the same time. You know, we don't know what's going to happen until we're doing it in the moment, and the audience doesn't know what's going to happen until it's there in the moment. Of course, everybody has their own individual stylistic foibles and their own musicalities, but that music's very special to that time, and it's about sharing, and it's about the best musical instrument, the drum, the